Welcome back to CFO Weekly, where we're talking with financial leaders about how to build efficiency in their teams, create time for strategy, and ultimately get results. With your host, Megan Weiss. Let's jump right in.
Today, my guest is John F. Kramer. John is the Chief Financial Officer of BCC Engineering, which is headquartered in Miami, Florida. BCC has offices throughout the state of Florida, Texas, Georgia, and Puerto Rico. It is a multidiscipline engineering, program management, and construction services firm that provides alternate delivery services, civil engineering and site development, planning, program management, structural engineering, transportation engineering, and water and wastewater services. John specialized in the engineering, architecture, construction industry at KPMG and has 28 years of experience working for international EAC companies. He has worked in Indonesia, Panama, India, and Saudi Arabia. From 2014 through 2019, he lived in Saudi Arabia, working for the Royal Commission Yanbu and for the public investment funds Qiddiya Investment Company. John is a CPA with an MS in accounting and an MBA in finance. He has been married to his wife, Jamie, for 31 years, and they have 6 children together. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's great to be here, Megan. I really enjoy listening to your podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, which will take a look at what it's like to be an expatriate and doing business in a foreign country, as well as how to manage diverse global teams with cultural differences and communication barriers. So let's get started. So first, tell me about your career progression and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. I went to the University of Missouri. I have a couple master's degree, an MBA in finance and a master's in accounting. I'm a CPA, and I started off my finance career at KPMG, which was just a great experience in Kansas City. And while at KPMG, I got into the engineering construction field, just from an audit standpoint. There is a lot of engineering construction firms in Kansas City. I would venture to guess there's probably $20 billion of that. And it's very interesting that Kansas City seems to be a hub for that.
Yeah.
But I've worked at some of the big places there. And in almost all of them, I've had international experience. And that ultimately brought me to what we're going to talk a little bit or a lot about today is my experience in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Currently, I'm working for BCC Engineering in Miami, Florida, and we are a multidiscipline firm. We are an engineering firm. We design structures and roadways and toll roads and construction engineering inspection work. And I've been here for 9 months, and I just really enjoy what I'm doing. So I'm the Chief Financial Officer. I work for a great guy named Jose Munoz, and it's not even never a dull moment here. We're going through changes with ASC 606, which probably a lot of people that may listen to this podcast are going through. And I just can't tell you how much fun that is. And, we're pursuing acquisitions. We had 2 acquisitions last year. We have more coming up this year. So even at my level of experience, I am still learning things day after day. So it's so important. It's been a great run.
It sounds like an exciting place to work. And yeah, I think it's so important, just the continuous learning and feeling like you're always growing. I think that makes for an exciting career.
Absolutely.
So are there any particular stories or moves that stand out in your mind as turning points throughout your career?
Yeah, I would say the first one is when I worked at Black & Veatch Engineering in Kansas City. I was going to take a job in Jakarta, Indonesia. I've been over there for about a month working on the financial portions of 2 large power plant projects. And I was actually scheduled to go work over there, take my family over there. And we were going to have our 3rd child over And actually, we would have the baby in Singapore, but actually, a different company in Kansas City called me, someone who I used to work with at KPMG, Lori Stubbers, and I went to work there. And that was a big turning point because I spent 15 years at that company, and that solidified my career. I held a lot of different positions in operations, finance, and in corporate finance, and ascended to the role of we called it the corporate financial officer of the $800 million subsidiary, which was infrastructure. So that was a huge turning point. But probably the biggest turning point in my career was at my son's basketball game on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m. I had an email that came across, and I was looking at my phone, and it said, "Hi, John, I'm so-and-so at Parsons Corporation, and would you like to go to work in Saudi Arabia?" And of course, I thought this was a junk email. And I, of course, said, "Absolutely. When can I start?" And to my surprise, the person called me back and said, "Hey, we can have an interview with you on Monday." And I began to think that this was serious at this point. So I interviewed. It was quite a process. And before I knew it, 2 months later, I was landing on an airplane in Saudi Arabia, beginning my expat career.
Wow. That is a life-changing email. So you touched on it a bit, but tell us about your current organization.
Yeah, like I said, we are a designer. We team with contractors and deliver civil and structural engineering projects from a design build standpoint. Most of our jobs are in a design bid build, the more traditional format. And a big growing part of our practice is construction, engineering, and inspection. And we have just recently, through acquisition, expanded our footprint in Atlanta and Georgia, and Texas, based out of Dallas and Houston. We're all over Miami, or we're all over Florida, and our headquarters are in Miami. So, like I said, BCC is it's a fantastic organization. It's been my best experience, and like I said, we talked about it. Even at this advanced age, so to speak, I'm learning every day. So, I have a great team.
And do you guys do projects around the world or just here in the United States?
Yeah, we're here in the United States. We do have a subsidiary in Puerto Rico, and there's quite a lot of work down there. There's a lot of U.S. firms down there, and there's a lot of civil structural work there. So even at BCC here in Florida, I am still involved with different aspects of business overseas, and then different things like transfer pricing, et cetera, and all those accounting and operational.
So let's talk about business in a foreign country. Where around the world have you worked?
Yeah, actually, I've worked in Jakarta, Indonesia, on a power plant job. I ran projects from a finance perspective in Argentina. I was involved in a design build project in Panama to build the new legislative center. In India, I was involved with the purchase of a engineering company that really was originally an outsourcing type company for the company I worked for, and then we bought it and brought it in-house. And then, of course, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and now in Puerto Rico.
And when you've traveled to those places, like how long are you there for? Is it a couple months or a couple years?
No, the only place that I have lived is in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I spent a little bit over a month in Jakarta, and the rest of those countries, I spent a lot of time in India. I was probably there for, in total, the acquisition, 90 days. But most of those were anywhere from a week trip to, as I said, 3 months.
What an amazing experience to see many parts of the world.
It really is. And this may sound corny, but I really, really feel this way. It just, in all my international travels, and I've been fortunate, to do it through business, there was never a greater thing when I was traveling than to hear the guys at Customs say, "Hello, Mr. Kramer, welcome home." And the United States, I feel like that we that are born here just hit the world lottery, and that's just reinforced through everywhere I travel.
I don't think that sounds corny at all. I feel the same way when I come home.
Yeah.
So let's talk specifically about Saudi Arabia. What were your first impressions?
Yeah, that's. I think it starts with, I worked first as a seconded employee for Parsons Corporation, who's headquartered in Pasadena, and I had to go through a series of many health tests. They just want to make sure that nobody has things like tuberculosis to bring in the country, and I had a couple-day physical that was just, everything was tested. I knew I was pretty healthy after I got through that. But the point that I would say I started at was filling out the paperwork for the kingdom. And I actually, at the very end, they passed me a piece of paper and I had to sign this. And it said, I'm paraphrasing, that I understand if I bring any illicit drugs into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that I understand that I would be put to death. And so that was the very beginning. Signing a document like that, of course, I had no intention of doing that, but that was quite sobering. So wow. I look back at it. I wish I would have saved that piece of paper, actually. It's kind of funny to look back at. But I arrived in Jeddah, which is the second largest city on the West Coast along the Red Sea in Saudi Arabia. And the city that I was traveling to is called Yambor, and it's about 300 kilometers north of Jeddah. I was picked up by a driver. He was late. And, as I was standing there, I was really the only Westerner that I saw. The women were wearing abayas with niqabs, so all you could see was their eyes. There were pilgrims coming in from many different foreign countries to visit Mecca and Medina. And then you just had your Saudi guys in their full thobes and sutras for the headdress. So I stood around there and it just felt like I was in a different country. I was treated very well. But as we finally drove up to Yambor. The sun was setting over the Red Sea. And it was kind of like these, it was almost like a scene in the movie, every 30, 40 kilometers, there was a refinery with, the burn off on top of the stack against the sun setting on the Red Sea. It was almost a surreal experience. That was definitely I just felt like it was in a movie almost. And we drove up and I stayed in the Hotel de Movenpick. And I ended up staying there for about 3 months until they got my housing settled. And just the thing when you're an expat, the different things you would take for granted, like setting up a bank account, getting a phone, understanding how you can contact your family back home, because I have 6 kids, a wonderful wife, and my 3 younger kids were going to join me, but I was going to be there probably for 6 months before they would. And so just all of that was just, I wouldn't say it was overwhelming, but it was almost surreal. I just remember one thing I remember was getting a phone and trying to make phone calls. And it would be like in the United States, that depending on who you're calling, you would drop a digit, the phone number, and it just took me a long time to really figure out how to use the phone even. So
I'm sure there's like a million challenges that we don't even think about before we embark on an adventure like that.
Yeah, it really is. And Parsons was a great company to work for, but the onboarding, everybody was thin. It was growing, and it just they subsequently made the onboarding a lot better, but it was pretty much grab, make a friend, and have him show you the ropes. Because Parsons had about 100 people over there, and working for the Royal Commission, who I worked for in Yambor. But my first day at work, to celebrate me coming, and the Saudis were incredibly hospitable. They brought me warm, unpasteurized camel milk with dates. And I was just sitting here thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a stomach ache at best. So they poured me one cup, I chugged it down. They poured me another one, I chugged it down, and just ate a bunch of dates. It was like hot, wild goat's milk. It was like gamey goat's milk. Oh. And but anyway, then I met my boss, Abdul Rahman bin Talal, who was just a great guy. And that's how I got started. I've kind of come through my first 2 days in Saudi, and it was quite an adventure.
So just out of curiosity, what led them to seek you out with that email?
Yeah, actually, I had applied to Parsons Corporation in Pasadena for a corporate finance role, and I guess I was in their database, so they were just mining that. They matched up with my international experience with the type of person they needed, and so I guess that's why they called me.
So you worked at Parsons when you went to Saudi Arabia. What was your role with them?
Yeah, actually, and I was working for Parsons, but I was a seconded employee, which in our industry means that I was lent to the finance department at the Royal Commission. So basically, I did not report to anyone from Parsons. Technically, my direct line reporting was to the Saudi director of accounting and then the Saudi CFO. So, it was very interesting. Like I said, Abdul Rahman bin Talal was just a great manager, and the CFO, Saad Al-Maki, was equally as great. And, they all spoke English, so that was very good. I didn't know how well the English would be spoken there. So, with that, I just kind of settled in and began my duties.
So let's talk about being an expat. It always sounds so exotic and exciting, but what is it really like and what does it take?
Yeah, it is exotic. And the expat packages, so to speak, have changed a little bit. But I'll talk about the exotic part of it. When my wife and 3 younger children joined me after I'd been there for 6 months for the second semester of the school year in 2015, we were able to travel to Jordan, Oman, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, Cairo, the UAE. So that package and the time we were able to have off was very, very, it was just outstanding for my kids to see these different cultures. That was the exotic part of it. But when I got into my role at the Royal Commission, I was tasked with 2 different things. They were trying to move from cash to accrual to be compliant with IPSAS, which is International Public Standards, and being compliant with the D20. So I did that. And then they wanted to put together a fixed asset inventory again, according to IPSAS. Now, this was a 50-year-old city that was built out of the desert. and there weren't really any financial records of fixed assets. And so that was quite a challenge to put that together.
So to all those people out there who are thinking that this might be something for them, would you recommend it? And if so, how does one go about getting a role that allows them to travel across the globe?
Yeah, I would absolutely recommend it. The younger you are, I think the better. If my kids would have been at the ages of early in grade school, I probably would have stayed there longer. My kids were teenagers and very active in sports. In fact, my two girls ended up getting scholarships to play soccer here in the United States. But if we wouldn't have gone back, they probably wouldn't have got the scholarships. But aside from that, well, I guess I would say if you were to want to go overseas, I talked about being young and doing it. The expat deals are fantastic, and they're still pretty good, but they're not as good as they used to be. And I can get into that more with Saudization, at least in the kingdom. But you would join with a company that has multinational operations. And my feeling is if you hold up your hand and show a willingness to do that, and you have the right makeup, which would mean that you're viewed as someone who's pretty flexible, tolerant, open to new ideas, you'd be a good candidate. But there's a lot of consulting firms over there, the best in the world, McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and I think landing a job with them, they are looking for people to go overseas. And then, of course, without a doubt, whatever language is spoken in the country that you're going to, becoming fluent in that would, obviously be a huge plus.
And how did your wife like living over there? Just out of curiosity again. And how was it on your family? Did they enjoy it, or was it difficult at all for them?
Yeah, it's and talk about the stories here. Well, I have to say that I've already mentioned it a little bit. My wife, a wonderful woman. Before we, like I said, we've had 6 kids and we've been married 31 years. She's moved to Boston with me. She's moved to Southern California with me, but she was willing to move to Saudi Arabia. And without that support, it just wouldn't have worked. But she was game to do it, and it's very different. The Western women there wear the niqabs, which is what you see on TV. It covers their head, and of course the abayas cover their body, all in black, and all you can see is people's eyes. Now, the Western women only had to wear abayas. They did not have to cover their hair, their whole head, except for their eyes. My wife has blonde hair, so she stuck out like just as you can imagine, blonde hair when everyone else has black hair. But it was funny. We would go to malls, and my 2 daughters who were there, and my son was there. My son has red hair. My 2 daughters, one daughter has light hair, and the other one has brown hair. And we were in a supermarket one time, and my daughter, who was probably in freshman in high school, was looking over the fruit to pick something out, and a woman came up behind her, started touching her hair and feeling it just because it was a different color. And obviously that shocked my wife, and it shocked my daughter, but the lady was just fascinated. And then my kids went to an international school, and I would say this about a lot of kids, certainly from Kansas City and throughout the United States. It's not just by any means limited to my kids, but they went to an international school in Yanbu. And then when we moved to Riyadh, my daughter went to the American school in Riyadh, the capital. But they were kind of rock stars there. As a matter of fact, my older daughter that was there is pretty tall, and she made friends with another American who was pretty tall. And for better or worse, the kids called them the Twin Towers. not anything sinister or anything like that. But both of them were good in sports. And so the sports was really fun because we played with the people all throughout, or we played teams throughout the kingdom. And at the school, you had some Americans, but you had a large population. There were Saudis in there even in the international school. And then there was Pakistani kids and some Indian kids. Obviously their parents or dads were expats. And so you look at the team pictures and it's really funny to see all these guys and then my son with this strawberry blonde hair and pale white skin. But they really enjoyed it. I think it opened their eyes. It was just fantastic. They made friends from all over the world. And it goes back to the corny comment I made. Sometimes we get cynical about the United States, but I think this world experience made them appreciate it a lot more. So it was a great experience for my family.
Yeah, it sounds like it was amazing. And I don't think there's any better way to learn than to travel. There's just no better experience in the world, I think, than to board a plane and get off in another country and learn their cultures, customs. And I just love to travel. So,
yeah, I agree with you, Megan. It's, we would get on planes, and I mentioned the countries that we went to, but we would go there, not know the customs. We just knew rudimentary Arabic, but, just to go in there for anywhere from a long weekend to a week and try to assimilate into the culture as well as you can it was just fascinating.
So what are some examples of cultural differences that you've encountered and how did you manage them?
Yeah, a couple of different things come to mind is, with the United States, we're used to the separation between church and state. Well, in Saudi Arabia, the laws are Sharia law, which basically means that they derive from the Quran. And, Saudis and all Muslims pray 5 times a day. And 3 of those prayer times fell during work hours. So the first day I was in Yambor, and then later when I was at Qiddiya in Riyadh, the call to prayer is over the loudspeaker. And the Saudi men and women would go into designated prayer rooms, or if there wasn't one close, they would go into a director's office and they would all pray together. And of course, we had to have reverence for those prayers, and certainly I respected it. So we just kind of sat at our desk during that. And, just that was I wouldn't say it's a rude awakening, but it's just something you don't see at all in the United States. So that was one of the big differences.
Yeah, I've traveled to Istanbul and just the call to prayer it's beautiful. It's like,
it is.
You can hear it anywhere. And it's just really like a haunting, beautiful sound.
And it's funny because that you say that. When I was in Riyadh, we lived in an American compound, and I lived in a few different places. And I think just to tease us a little bit, there were mosques built right outside the compound, and the speakers for the prayer were pointed right down into the compound. And so, Fajr prayer comes pretty early. And so they piped that, and you could hear it. It would wake you up in the morning.
Yeah, I'm sure there was no sleeping in.
There was no sleeping in.
So did you actually hire Saudi nationals and foreign nationals? And if so, describe that process.
Yeah, actually I did. My team, and I'll talk more about Qiddiya. And Qiddiya is a large project outside of Riyadh. And it is 360 square kilometers with 300 different unique attractions. There's going to be a Six Flags there, everything from a Six Flags to an opera house to racetracks to climbing rock cliffs, everything you could think of, teaching people how to drive Formula One. This was the project that I was on, and I was there at the inception as the director of financial accounting. And then I hired a team of, I had Saudi men and one Saudi woman on the team. And it's interesting with the Saudi woman because that was kind of new. Qiddiya is a very progressive project. It is championed by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And it was progressive in the standpoint that women were in the workplace, which I did not see in Yambor at all. But I had, like I said, Saudi men, 3 of them, and a Saudi woman. I had someone from Afghanistan, a Palestinian gentleman, and somebody from Jordan. And I would say that the hiring wasn't too much different, but it was from the standpoint that, of course, I didn't know anything about the schools in Saudi Arabia. A lot of the applicants have been educated outside of Saudi Arabia, and they were fluent in English. But one of the interesting things was interviewing a woman that ultimately I hired who was wearing the abaya and then the niqab. So in the interview, I could just see her glasses. I couldn't see her, but she had a great resume.
Yeah, that would be strange. And yeah, I see a lot of resumes from around the world, and I'm always like surprised at what some countries will put on resumes, like religion, marital status. I mean,
You're right.
We get used to seeing things a certain way, and we have to remind ourselves it's not always that way.
It's not that way, and the getting used to seeing pictures on resumes was very odd to me.
Yeah, I agree. So do you have any tips for breaking down language or communication barriers?
I do. And not just based on my experience, obviously, where you're at, do your best to learn the language. And, even if it starts out with standard greetings, that goes a long way. So I tried to learn the standard greetings. How are you, Kefalik? All the different things. Good morning, good afternoon, Assalamu alaikum. Everything that is just the standard things that you would say, the pleasantries. But then the other thing I would say is learn words, because if you have a vocabulary, even if you don't know how to conjugate a verb, you can still get by. So learning a vocabulary of just words, cat, dog, bathroom, restaurant, etc., can get you by. Another thing I would do with the guys there is I would write down questions that I would use in everyday life, and I would ask them to translate that for me, and then I would ask them to translate a response that I might give to the answer to my question. And then I would say, after you get into that, try to go formal and learn the conjugation. Arabic is very hard. Obviously, everybody's seen Arabic signs. The hardest thing I think about Arabic is that they have about 27 characters, which is just like our alphabet. But the letter A would be a different symbol, is whether it was an apple at the beginning of the word, it would be different than cat in the middle of the word. And if you said abaya, it would be different at the end of the word. So you had 3 different ways to write this, and it just is it's a tough language.
Yeah, I had a hard enough time learning French and Spanish throughout school.
The alphabet. But what I would say, Megan, is as terrible as my Arabic was, and we could rely a lot on English. When I tried, people's face lit up.
Yeah.
And they knew I was trying, and they knew I wasn't, just being an arrogant outsider. And the thing I've learned very early on traveling throughout the world is if you speak English and you repeat yourself and say it louder and louder and slower, they still don't get it. So, you got to try to learn the language.
Yeah, I think it goes a long way just to show you're making an effort, even if you never quite get there.
Yeah, I agree.
So what skills do you think that you need to possess in order to work with and manage a multinational team? Yeah,
I think it's really the basic principles are not too much different than you would have in the United States. What I tried to do is when I hired somebody, I wanted to give them a career path and the ability to learn. And obviously the ability to advance in their careers. I would get to know them, on a semi-personal level, not something that's inappropriate. We get to know a little bit about their family, what they've got going on outside of work, and from a work standpoint, understand where they want to go. The one thing I also tried to do is make work less stressful for them. We in the United States, from what I've seen, and obviously, Megan, you have a lot of experience as well. No matter where I've been, I haven't seen people work the crazy hours that we do in the United States. And, a lot of the attitude is the work will get done when it gets done. And they value family time. And I don't think their life gets out of balance, at least as much as mine does. I don't want to speak for everybody, but just not trying to impose American standards on what they're doing. If they had issues, I'd try to resolve them quickly. I'd give them feedback. I would be very honest and open with them. So, all that, probably not any different than I tried to do in the United States, seemed to work there.
So compare and contrast doing business in a foreign country versus here in the United States.
Okay, well, the first thing I would say is in the United States, and this happened in Indonesia when I first got into this, to get our invoice processed, and we have some big invoices because we were building a power plant. In the United States, I've never got a request to buy a refrigerator from my cousin whose wedding it was to get the invoice off to the next step. So that's probably one of the first things that I was interesting early in my career. The next thing I would say relative to surely Saudi Arabia is that laws for business and really laws through life in general, the cultural is driven by Sharia law, which is driven by the teachings in the Quran. So that's different. One of the things that is very different that I had to understand learning contracts is right now Saudi Arabia in Hijri, and that just means the Muslim date is in the year 1442, I believe, while we're in 2021. And then that corresponds to, I think, the year the Prophet Muhammad was born, or forgive me, maybe when he died, but it was based on that. So that was interesting. The other things I've already mentioned, the culture prayer is just a shocking experience when I first started. And just the way contracts were written, not only the dates, but how specifically they dealt with different countries. And, there's a rift with Israel, and some of that was in contracts, some of the older contracts. And so, there was just so many different things that were different.
Lastly, on a more personal note, what's one goal that you're hoping to accomplish either personally or professionally this year?
Basically, I talked a little bit about acquisitions, and we are absorbing 2 acquisitions from the prior year, and we're looking at many different opportunities this year. And so this is really getting me familiar with ASC 606 and 805 and ASC 810 and 350 and all these different details of these accounting pronouncements. And really, until I started getting into it, I just didn't realize the breadth of what goes into purchase accounting, especially when you're purchasing a foreign subsidiary under a variable interest entity. So I know I quoted a lot of pronouncements there, but just actually doing that and getting these companies onboarded and set up financially.
John, with all the traveling you've done, I'm sure you must have a few of your favorite stories. Would you mind sharing one or two of those with our audience today?
So there's so many different experiences that I had in Saudi Arabia. One of them was I went to buy a car in Jeddah. Like I said, it was 300 kilometers south. And the gentleman who was selling me the car was very gracious. He walked me through all the ins and outs of licensing the car at the DMV. I had to bring cash. And when I got on the airport, I got on the plane. When I went through security, they saw what was $25,000 in cash, and they're wondering what I was doing with it. But they let me on, and then they let me through when I arrived in Jeddah. And so I bought this car and got it licensed and everything. And so the guy asked me, he says, do you mind if you take me home? And I said, absolutely not. So I was taking him back to his place, and a mosque came up and he said, hey, it's Durher prayer. Do you mind if I go in and pray? And I said, absolutely. You spent all day with me, and sure. How can I accommodate you? So we're parked on the far side of the street. He walks across the street. Then he comes back to my car and says, would you like to come in? And I said, well, I'm a Catholic. I'm not allowed, am I? And he said, no, all you got to do is take your shoes off, and you're my guest, and come on in. And so I walked in, and it was all carpet. There was no chairs. And so he went up to where the front of this, that was kind of like an altar, and he went through his prayers up there. And so he said, you can sit, you don't have to kneel. So I'm sitting there. I hear the door open, and it's just me and the guy I bought the car from. Nobody else is in the mosque. And someone comes up right behind me and says, John. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, I'm the only John here. Who is this? He said, John Kramer. And so I turned around and he said, I'm a friend of Samir's here. And I hear you're interested in converting to Islam. And I said, interesting. I said, I'm going to have to run that by the wife if I'm going to do that. And so Samir comes up, and I'm talking to both these guys, and they basically tried to convince me to convert to Islam on the spot. And what I felt was, so I was looking around. Like I said, I've only been in this country for 30 days now, and we're the only guys in the mosque, and I don't know what's going on or what to think. You can imagine how my mind is running wild. And but I kind of gained my senses, and I said, okay, so what would it take if I wanted to sign up right now? And they said, well, you need to just say you accept Allah in your heart and soul, and then you're good. And so they said, yeah. And I said, really, again, I'm going to have to run this by my wife. I don't know if she'd be up on this. When she comes over here, I'm not Catholic anymore. I'm a Muslim. And so I said, guys, I'm going to have to think about it. Can I get your numbers, and I'll call you? And so they gave me some pamphlets, and they had my number already because I'd been talking to the guy in the car. So he said, they sent me several texts and emails afterwards, and I just said, guys, it's not the right time. But that was one story. Probably another interesting story was when I was at Qiddiya, we had a budget presentation, and it's interesting because we're in our office and you wait until the handlers of the prince call you. And, we just got the call in the afternoon at 2:30 in the afternoon. Then you have to be over there in half an hour. So we go over there and we go into the prince's, his palace and his quarters. And I was expecting something like a big palace that you might see on TV, but it was more kind of like a really, really nice Ritz-Carlton or something with a bunch of beautiful buildings and gardens and many multiple, just gardens, not attractions, but many buildings. And none so much stood out to me to be like a palace. But we went into a room, and we went 4 floors downstairs into this building. We waited until 1:30 in the morning, so 11 hours to be able to present. And while we were waiting, there's consultants, if you can think about this, presenting to the Crown Prince on a lot of different projects, a lot of different issues. And so all of us consultants, we had to check our phones at the door, but you're waiting in this waiting room with people from all over the world with different agendas, et cetera. And there's probably one of the best spreads of food I've ever seen in my life. So we waited there. But when it got close to our time to present, the Yemen, it's the Houthi rebels, launched a missile from Yemen towards the palace.
Wow.
And, we got word of this, and this was the second attack. So basically what happened was the Crown Prince, of course, didn't show up. We were there. But it was funny, the next day I'm in the office, and again, this is a multicultural staff, and I get a standing ovation because I was an American Patriot's missile batteries outside of Riyadh, shot it down.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Yeah, and I'll tell you about a Saudi wedding real quick. So when you go to a Saudi wedding, and most of the marriages are arranged, and before you get to say yes or no, whether you're a woman or a man, you get about 10 minutes to meet them. And you see the woman, in normal clothes without her body on, and you have to make a decision. So if you make the decision to get married, obviously there's a ceremony. So I was invited to 2 of those. And the unique thing was we were in a large, what would be like a conference center with 2 big ballrooms. And the way the Saudi wedding works is there's the men's side and the women's side. And so the 2 do not mix. So we sat down on the men's side, and the groom gets to go over to the woman's side for a little bit, and the bride does not come over to the men's side. But we sat down around circles of trays, eating goat and rice with our hands, and there was dancing and all that, but it was guys and girls separated. So that was probably the most unique wedding I've ever been to.
Yeah, that sounds like an experience for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a million reasons to travel, but one of the top ones is definitely for the stories.
Yeah, exactly.
John, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, Megan, I appreciate it. And thanks for listening. And it's great. I love your podcast. So I look forward to listening to more of your episodes.
Yeah,
have a good weekend.
Thanks. And I've really enjoyed our discussion today and getting to know you and hearing about your experiences overseas. You shared some great stories with us. And for that, I thank you. To all of our listeners today, I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion as well. And I hope you'll tune in next week. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great week.
If you're ready to boost efficiency and streamline your accounting processes at significant cost savings, it's time to talk with Personiv. Their people-powered solutions have transformed the delivery of back-office tasks and general accounting functions for decades, partnering with clients to provide everything from accounts payable to payroll services. See what Personiv can do for you by visiting personiv.com.
You've been listening to CFO Weekly, presented by Personiv. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to hear all of our episodes. Want to learn more? Check out personiv.com. Thanks for listening.